March 23rd, 2026 at 6 p.m. in St. Paul's, the Stay Alive Literature and Step Group. Our speaker tonight is Ben W., and they are sharing their experience on Step 11. Please help me welcome Ben.
Hi, my name's Ben, and I am an alcoholic.
Hi, Ben.
And, it's nice to see so many faces out here. Welcome to everybody that's here from Avenues, and congratulations to 2 years. That's awesome, and I know how hard that is. Getting sober, God, it was so hard. It was the hardest thing I ever did, and getting sober and finding a way to be peaceful and happy sober is a journey that's still unfolding today, and that took a long time. And but it's possible. I didn't think that it was possible. I thought that if you got sober, that your life was just going to be spent going to meetings and like one day at a time, just kind of dealing with the boredom of sobriety, and that it would never really be fun. I would never really get that happy, and I would never really feel okay inside of myself. Because I don't know about you guys, but like when I first started drinking, it was a lot of fun. Like I had a great time drinking, and I had a great time doing all the things that I did. I qualify for just about every 12-step group that's out there. But alcohol was the first thing I picked up, and it was the last thing that I put down. And in the beginning, it was a lot of fun. I grew up right around here, and I grew up in a family that was supportive. My parents are together. I have a couple sisters. I have 3 sisters, and they all kind of marched to the beat of the same drum, and they were a great family, supportive and everything. I can't complain about my childhood. I had a good childhood. I know that's not everybody's experience, but it was my experience. And life seemed like it was going to be great. I remember when I was younger thinking like someday I'll end up going to college. I'll end up like probably getting married, having a good job, and like the world's my oyster. And I was pretty good at athletics. I was a good student. I had friends. I was happy. And the only thing I know is that when I was 13 years old, I took my first drink. And I just loved the feeling of getting drunk. It's not like it did something for me. It wasn't like this magical thing that took me out of an emotional and mental prison at that time. It was just a lot of fun. And I remember thinking like, I'm going to tell all my friends to like get liquor from their parents, and we're going to drink as often as we can. And I was 13, so we couldn't do it every weekend, but we did it as often as we could. And like, I do know something about alcoholism and addiction, and it's kind of like this really slow storm that kind of rolled its way into my life. And I didn't see it until it was like hailing and snowing and the wind was blowing and it was too late. I didn't see it coming. Because in the beginning it was so much fun, it didn't seem like a bad thing. It seemed like a great addition to my life. And but I always drank to blackout. Like I always had a relationship to drugs and alcohol that I didn't ever do just enough. Like I did that much and more. And I always drank to blackout, or at least that was the goal, I thought. I didn't realize that I had a body that was alcoholic. I found this out later on, that I have a body that is alcoholic and that it requires another drink, that I break out in what's called the phenomenon of craving. So when I start drinking, I drink until everything's done and then some. And when I start using anything, whether it's pills, powder, whatever, I use whatever's in front of me and all the rest that's there. Like I can't just have enough. I didn't know that. So I always thought that I drank to blackout because it was a choice, that like that's what I like to do. It took me a long time to figure out what I suffered from in Alcoholics Anonymous. So what happened for me was the fun started to become a problem. I started to get arrested. I started to get in trouble. My grades started slipping. And like I said, this happened slowly over a long period of time. So it's like when I started drinking, something happened immediately, and that was that drinking became a little bit more important than just about everything else. So like while I'm going to school and thinking about a future, what's more important is I'm thinking about Friday night. And Friday night became Friday and Saturday night, and Friday and Saturday night became Sunday night, and Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday. And within a number of years, I was drinking every day. And by the time I turned 21, I was a full-fledged alcoholic. I had dropped out of college, and other substances started to come into play too. And then things really started to take off. And what happened for me is at a certain point in time, like in the beginning, and I don't know if this is the same for you guys, like I could drink and I could do whatever on the weekends. And then come Monday, when I wasn't doing that stuff, I still felt pretty good. Like life was still all right. I still felt okay. But at a certain point in time, it was like when I was sober, life was kind of black and white and really dull. And I became like really bored with my surroundings. And then I couldn't wait to drink because it kind of turned the lights back on. And then what happened was that little bit of dullness in my life became massive depression. And then what I started to realize is that when I wasn't drinking and I wasn't using drugs, I started to have this anxiety. I started to feel really scared. And what happened for me is instead of it being a party, now drinking and drugging became a way to release me from some kind of an emotional prison. And what I didn't realize is that emotional prison, that uncomfortability in my own skin, was untreated alcoholism. And that I began to treat that untreated alcoholism with alcohol. And what I know today, and it took me a long time to understand and a long time to find out, is that one of the best treatments, the best treatment, aside from a spiritual awakening, for alcoholism is alcohol, if that makes sense to you guys. See, I spent a lot of time in AA trying to fight alcohol. You know what I mean? Like, I came to meetings, and when I was coming into AA, my first meeting was in 1995, and I didn't find happy and contented sobriety until 2012. So I spent a number of years in and around recovery fighting alcohol and the drug, and I was told at rehabs, and I was told at meetings, like, put the substance down, come to meetings, and your life will get better as a result of not using the substances anymore. And I kind of thought, like, okay, well, I can get little periods of time sober. I can get little periods of time away from the substance. But what I'm left with is this insane uncomfortability inside of my own skin. What I'm left with is so much fear that I can barely look people in the eyes. And what I'm left with is a massive depression and a sadness inside of me that I don't know what's wrong with me. And so I began to go to therapy, and I began to go to doctors to get medications to treat the depression, and I'm not using drugs because I'm going to, and alcohol because I'm going to meetings, and I'm getting worse. And I start to think that I suffer from something they haven't discovered yet, like a very unique mental illness. I'm not just an alcoholic, but I'm also beyond help because I'm not drinking, I'm not using any kind of substances, and I'm getting worse. And I'm getting like suicidal, like that bad. And then I would inevitably drink again. And then people would say like, hey kid, why'd you drink again? And it's like, don't you feel like I feel? Like how does anybody sit in here and not drink anymore and be okay? Like for me, to get sober is one of the most painful processes there is. And if you're telling me to just put the substance down and like say some prayers and live one day at a time, I feel like I'm putting a Band-Aid over a bullet wound. Because I have this gaping hole inside of me and I'm in pain all the time. And then I drink again. And this cycle was repeated over and over and over again. And I became really hopeless. But I ended up meeting a guy in a meeting out in New Jersey, outside of the area that I was going to meetings at. And he heard me share, and he said, hey, I want to talk to you after the meeting. And I sat down and I talked to this guy, and he said, why do you think that you're an alcoholic? And I said, well, I drink too much. And he said, yeah, what do you think you drink for? And I said, because I'm in so much pain. And he said, well, that pain that you're in, and he asked me to describe it. And I said, it's this unbearable uncomfortability in my own skin. It's this inability to connect to other people. It's this loneliness that's like I'm alone in a room full of people. And I feel horrible about myself and I hate myself. And he said, that's untreated alcoholism. And I'm like, but what are you talking about? Like, I'm not drinking. And he said, yeah. And alcohol treats alcoholism. And it's a really good treatment for alcoholism. So if you're going to take the alcohol away, wouldn't it make sense that you have to replace it with something that's going to do the same thing, if not more? And I said, yeah. But when I get sober, like, nothing happens. And he said, that's because you haven't taken any action. And he said, these guys figured out in the 1930s, a long time ago, that there's a step-by-step process to do for you what the alcohol did for you. To fill you in a way that the alcohol filled you. You know that space when you take about 3 shots, or when you take just the right amount of pills, or when you just snort the right amount of whatever, or you inject the right amount of whatever. You know that thing that happens, that magic that happens. That's a synthetic spiritual awakening. It's a chemical-induced spiritual awakening. And that's what it is, because I've had an authentic spiritual awakening, a profound one through these steps. And it felt very similar to that. And what I realized is that alcoholism is a real thirst for spirituality. And if you have it, you're very hungry for spiritual awakening. And synthetically, a spiritual awakening through chemicals will kill you, and it'll ruin everything along the way in your life. And that's what happened to me. And the cool thing is that having alcoholism, having addiction, is an offering to have an amazing life. It's an offering to have a life better than a life you could have had if you never got alcoholism in the first place. If you accept the treatment for it. And when they read how it works, it says stuff like, we let go completely. You know? And they mean completely. Like, to whatever degree, if you're sitting here today and you haven't treated your alcoholism yet, or you're just trying to figure out how to start that process, to whatever degree you can say, you know what, this thing is not going to go away. This pain is not going to go away. This life is just going to keep on being the way that it is, or maybe worse. But I have the opportunity to take a course of action that could radically change my life from the inside out. Please do it. Please do it, because you're offered something that I didn't know was even possible until I took the action. And I surrendered completely, because when this guy met with me and he said, look, if you take these steps in the time that I outline, if you sit down with me and you let me guide you through a course of action that you may or may not believe in, I promise you that you can have a life where you can start to feel whole again. You can start to feel peace again. And you can start to be of service again. You can actually have an amazing life. And it's up to you. Are you willing to do that? I don't know about anybody else, but I suffered so much. And I didn't want to do the things that I was doing. I didn't want to hurt people. I didn't want to go to jail. I didn't want to go to rehab. I didn't want to put these chemicals into my body. I didn't want to lie. I didn't want to be a piece of crap. I didn't want to be a person that I hated. And I hated myself. And I remember my sponsor saying, we're going to take a course of action, and the course of action is going to address your extreme self-centeredness. Because that's the root of alcoholism and addiction, is extreme self-centeredness. And I said, look, man, I know when I was drinking and I was using, I was selfish. I did a lot of really selfish things. But when I'm not doing that stuff, I hate myself. I feel puny. How could I be selfish and self-centered to the extreme? Because my idea of somebody that's selfish and self-centered to the extreme is somebody that's like got this big ego and they think they're better than everybody. He said, no, it's just that you think about yourself all the time and you can't stop. He said, how often do you think about all the crap that you did when you were out there? How often do you think about how much you hate yourself? How often do you think about what other people think about you? And I went, oh, is that what they're talking about? And he said, yeah. And I said, well, that is extreme because it happens all the time. I just have a tape that plays constantly about fear and anxiety and worry and hate and anger and self-pity, all these things. And the only thing that's ever been able to stop that tape is the certain amount of whatever. And he said, these steps are designed to stop that tape. They're designed to give you freedom. Not relief, not just sober one day at a time. Radical freedom. And so I took this course of action, and we're talking about the 11th step, so I'm going to fast forward. But I took a course of action with this guy where I learned about my alcoholism in the beginning. I learned what it meant to have the body of an alcoholic and the mind of an alcoholic, and that I was going to go back to it time and time again, despite my most desperate desire not to. And that was my experience. Ben, why did you drink again? I don't know. It's just what I do. I'm going to do it again. I drink when I'm happy. I drink when I'm sad. I drink when I'm thinking about drinking. And I drink when I don't think I'm thinking about drinking. I just drink again. He said, you have the mind of an alcoholic, and you have no mental defense against that drink unless you have a spiritual awakening. And so I learned about my alcoholism, and then I went through a process of looking at myself in step 4. And then I looked at myself. I looked at my resentments. I looked at my fears, and I looked at my sex conduct, my relationship conduct. And really, I started to take this outward-looking lens because I was so focused on the world. I was so focused on how bad I had it and what people did to me. And my dad didn't love me enough. And the police were always too hard on me. And the COs were too hard on me. And I didn't get the right therapist. And I didn't have the right girlfriend. I didn't have the right love. And I started to take that lens and shine it back right on me. Well, how did I show up to life? How did I show up for my family? Why did I put myself in a position to get arrested all those times? What was I doing to contribute to life? And I just saw the truth of that. I did all of this to myself. All the fear I had was fear that because I'd screwed up, so I should have a lot of fear. And if I'm going to continue to manage my life and not let something else happen, I should be scared as hell. Because I'm not any good at it, left to my own devices. My best thinking is to put these chemicals in my body and rob people and go to jail and crash cars and hurt everybody around me. I should really want something else, some power greater than me to run my life. And I saw that in my inventory, and I remember my sponsor, he was this little bald guy. And he was the nicest guy in the world, but I knew he was a savage in his addiction. And that's why I love this guy. I knew this guy drank like I did, and probably worse. I knew he probably hurt people. I could just tell. You can just tell with some people. This guy was definitely a savage. But he was the most peaceful man. And he just talked about meditation all the time. And helping people. And he said, Ben, go through this process. Get in touch with something beyond your mind. Get in touch with something inside of yourself. And then I want you to sit in that space. Because what happened for me is somewhere around my 5th step, I started to feel this peace. And what happened was, I don't know about you guys, but I used to just look like this. I didn't want to look people in the eye because I was afraid you would see what I thought about myself. I couldn't look anybody in the eye for more than a split second. And I remember right after my 5th step, that night I went to a meeting and I was just looking around a room and I was looking at people. Kind of like this. And I was comfortable. And I felt like my neck was a little bit sore because it had been down, like this all the time. And I felt this warm feeling. And I remember thinking, like, I feel like I'm buzzed. Like, I feel like I'm kind of high, but like really good. And like I said, I had been in and around recovery for a long time and never experienced this feeling. But I had also never taken a course of action in the manner that I did with this guy. And I called him after the meeting and I said, what's happening to me? What's happening? And he started laughing. And he said, man, you're getting it. You're getting it. That's what this is about. He said, it doesn't happen all the time that quickly, but it does to some people, and it's happening to you. But it does happen to everybody eventually that does this process. And he said, kid, grab it. And like it's here now, this piece. And I longed for this peace. So if you long to feel okay, it's here. And so I began to pray and meditate and help people. And I began to listen to him about meditation and prayer. And I began to sit in this space that was awakening, this silence that was awakening inside of me. I began to just sit in it. You know what was the hardest thing for me to do for years? Silence. I didn't have silence in my life. I loved jail because it was loud on the block. I hated nighttime. I couldn't stand the silence. I just loved chaos. I didn't know how to function without it. But when this peace started to open up inside of me and I could sit in it, it is to this day my favorite thing to do. Because when your mind stops, there's something else inside of you that's not your voice saying, I this, I that, all that. When that thing stops, there's something else in there, and it is bottomless. And it's unknowable, but you can experience it. And that's why they ask us to sit in meditation and prayer in the 11th step. To expand your conscious contact. Conscious contact means to experience God. And meditation is experiencing where God lives, and it's inside of you. Just beyond who you think you are. If you take this course of action and you flatline that thing that doesn't shut the heck up, there is something else there. I promise you that. The offering here is to find that. And then the offering here is to find that and then help other people to find that. What a great life. What an amazing life. That people are doing all kinds of stuff out there. I don't know what it means. Making money, having experiences, all this stuff, and that's wonderful. I know one thing. I found like the thing. In Alcoholics Anonymous, I found the thing that everybody wants. They're just looking in the wrong place, and that's the offering here. So go through this course of action. Take these steps. Awaken to that thing inside of you that you've already been looking for in the chemicals. You're already thirsty. You know what I mean? You guys know what that thirst is. And it's offered here. Take it completely and then try to give it back. And you will have an unbelievable life. Even if nothing else ever changes, you will change. And you will be happy. And you will be content. Even when things suck. Even when it's hard. You don't have to live that way, and you don't have to go back. Thank you.
Ben, that was an incredible story. Extremely powerful. Please help me thank Ben again. We've come to the part of our meeting